Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
And Joanne Soike with For Better For Worse.
And Lisa Batasca with Canine Defined.
Hi, all. Let us know you're out there. Today we have a delicate topic that we all, as dog owners, have to deal with at one time or another, and that is the loss of our pets and how to deal with some of the grief that comes along with it. Because it's really very challenging. Those of us who live with our dogs the way some of us do with dog sports and all, and they become so much of a part of our lives that when we lose them, it's a process. And others in our families and in our circle that doesn't involve dog people may have a difficult time um, understanding how we're feeling and that whole process. So today we have Sandy Grossman with petloss.org, right?
Petlosspartners.org.
Yeah, petlosspartners.org. And she's going to kind of chat with us a little bit about this topic and kind of help us, those of us who are maybe have experienced it, which many of us have, or are getting, some of our dogs are getting older and are in that moment to be able to deal with it, and always in the future to be able to handle that. So Sandy, could you tell us a little bit about your organization and what you do and all that?
Yeah, so I am, as I was mentioning, so I do a few things. I'm a certified pet loss specialist. I've been doing this work for 13 years now. I also am a certified end of life pet loss doula. So I also work with people whose pets are at the end of their life or getting to the end of their life and need help in navigating how to make that time as peaceful and memorable and good is not really a word, right, but just at least peaceful as possible. And then I also work with people who are in the animal care fields in terms of compassion fatigue and self-care. And really all this started for me 15 years ago when I lost my own guy, and was single. I had lost both parents in a 4-year period prior to that. And I was just broken when I lost him. And at that time I was living in a suburb of LA, and you would think there'd be a lot of resources out there, and there was not. It was 2007. I found one support group. And as I began to heal, and my background's in psychology, I decided that I really wanted to help others. And that's what made me decide to go and get trained and certified as a specialist. And today I do individual sessions. We do virtual support groups. We have a chat room a couple of times a week, and really just want to get the information out there, because I think pet loss, well, I know pet loss is one of the most disenfranchised type of grief that we can go through. And it's so important to know that you don't have to go through it alone. That, I always say those of us who love animals and pets are kind of a special breed of people, right? Because we open up our hearts in a very unique way and get to have this amazing love. But that also means at some point we have just a devastating loss. And so it's all about helping people begin to heal from that and know that you don't have to do it by yourself.
Mm. So we've had a few the business that we're in, we have um, dogs, we lose dogs and all that. And and a lot of people, what they do is they come to class after the loss of the dog as part of the healing process, right? Because they are getting that support from their classmates, because everybody understands and how that is and how so is this recommended? I know for myself it works. Like I like that. I want to be around people who understand, right?
Right.
My family, my husband understands obviously, but some of my other family members, they don't get it.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so hard, right? I always say our society isn't good at grief in general, but when it comes to pet loss, the majority of people still don't understand it, right? And so we can feel very alone. We could feel, I can't tell you the number of people who have come to me and said, I think I'm going crazy, or there's something wrong with me, or I don't know why this loss hurts worse than the loss of my mother or brother or uncle or grandfather, or whoever it may be, and the point is that it hurts that bad because we had such a unique relationship with them.
Yeah.
That unconditional love is not something we share with a lot of people.
Oh, that's a true statement.
Right.
That's a true statement.
Since you said you are a psychologist, didn't they recently in the last 10 years, do some studies where they found the grief segments of the brain for a pet are almost the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so that's another thing, right? So years ago when I was growing up, and I'm probably aging myself, those in animal care field, they didn't really think of pets as family members, right? And that's why a lot of times a lot of the older vets, and unfortunately, I mean, veterinary schools are getting better, but they still, in my opinion, don't do enough with it. Talk about loss or feelings, and they don't acknowledge it. But animals absolutely love, we know that, and they grieve. And so we're becoming more aware of, for instance, I was reading something yesterday. There's a new study showing that the purr of a cat can actually decrease blood pressure. Just sitting next to a cat and it's really purring. So the benefits are huge, and we're beginning to realize that pets understand more, they feel more. They're not just working animals that we keep outside anymore. They're really part of our family. I also have a class where I have a lot of people in the veterinary field. I have a lot of pet sitters. I get dog trainers. I get mental health professionals. It's an online pet loss specialist course. And so many people come to me because they do have clients and they just don't know how to help them.
Right.
And so,
right. Yeah, it's that is true. And then the and this is where I know we're going to talk about it a bit later, but the compassion care, because those of us who work with dogs also get very attached to clients' dogs. So some of those losses are almost like your own. So it's magnified when you work with, some of these dogs have been with us for many, many years and have been part of our lives for years, and then they're gone. So it's sometimes it's even harder for us to keep it together to help the client, right? Because you are grieving as much as they are, because that dog has become part of your
right. Or two, an experience that you see when your clients go through can actually bring you back to a loss that you've experienced that was very similar. Either the pet has the same name, the pet looks the same, or similar circumstances. And I always kind of talk about that, grief is not just one layer. It's more like a layer cake of different parts of it that all kind of interact and interfere with each other at times.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the top layer, but then there's the other losses you've had underneath it.
Right. And so I wanted to we wanted to talk about like when, because I know Lisa had some questions about behavioral euthanasia, but the difference, like when, for those like I'm going through it right now, right, trying to figure out, is my dog having a good day, if he's having a bad day, because I have one that is right now seems or feels to me that she's having more good days than bad. So I'm like, okay, so we're not ready yet, but I know it's imminent, right? So how do we know as their their people, because that's I think one of the best gifts we can give a dog is the ability to let them go without suffering a long time. We cannot do that with people, but we can do it with them. And I know some of us, and I've had some clients and some staff that have held on to their dogs much longer than they probably should have, and
Yeah.
suffered a little bit more than probably it needed to. So,
And listen, I mean, I think it's probably the most difficult thing we'll ever be asked to do.
Mhm.
You know, and I hear a lot of people say, I can't do it. I can't kill my dog, right? Well, you're not killing them. It's the cancer or the kidney disease or the age or whatever it is. That's what's killing them. You're just making a compassionate decision to end the suffering. And I think part of it is when you look at it that way too, but still it's very difficult. And that's why I always talk about, just like as we age, right? We have to start making some plans. We get life insurance. We decide where our resting place will be, whether it be cremated or in a cemetery, right? We make a will. All of that's horribly uncomfortable. Nobody wants to think about it, yet there really is a peace when you do that. And so I always say the same thing for animals, right? We owe them that. So one of the biggest misconceptions, and I know a lot of vets are trying to correct that now, is that the animal's going to tell us when they're ready to go. No, they don't. Most times they do not. And even if they do, we're so emotionally invested, we wouldn't know it anyway, because we're just wrapped up in the grief of it, or the anticipatory grief. And so you should have tools. You should have, like I said, the quality of life scale by Dr. Alice Villalobos is excellent. It allows you to track and see how your pet is doing on 6 different attributes. I have something I'd be glad to send to anyone who's interested called the Pledge from the Heart. Have those conversations, those honest conversations, as hard as they may be, with your vet, and say, how do I know? What are some of the signs that I should look for?
so Lisa, did you say that? Lisa, did you find that?
Yeah, yes, I can put that up.
Yeah, just put it in the comments. Lisa found or put it on the screen if you can. While she continues, I'm sorry, Sandy.
That's okay. So, and it may be even thinking about what are 3 things that your dog loves to do, that when they no longer can do it, that may be showing that's a sign that their time is limited or getting closer. And here's the important thing to remember, and it's hard for us because that's not who we are, is that animals do not fear death at all. I'll share a quick story with you. The very first dog I had was a collie mix who was a year older than me. He was about 12 years old. And we lived in an apartment, but it had like a screen door in the kitchen where he can go in and out. And he was so smart. He knew how to jump up and open the door, and it was an enclosed yard. Well, one day, and he, like I said, he was about 12 years, maybe 13, because I was 12. He didn't come in for dinner. And so my mom said, go get him. And I went out into the yard, and there was a shrubbery row, and I was calling him, Randy, where are you? And he was laying behind a row of bushes. And when he got up really slowly. And I noticed he was kind of laying in a ditch. And he came in and he had a little bit of dinner, and he played a little bit with me and my brother. And the next morning, he couldn't stand. And he was doing the open mouth breathing, which meant his lungs were filling with fluid. And so my dad took him to the vet, and it was time to have him euthanized. But my dad mentioned to him, and he said, it's the strangest thing. My daughter found him kind of laying in a little bit of a ditch that he had dug. And so the vet said, yeah, he had gone there to die. It's not that he didn't love you or that he didn't care about how you felt. He just knew that his body was dying. He understood it. He wasn't afraid of it. He knew it was his time. And I think even though animals are domesticated, there still is that nature part of them. And they're not afraid of death. They don't worry about, is it going to hurt? Who am I going to leave behind? Do I have my things in order? Right? They just know that their body is dying and that they have to go. And I think when we look at it that way, it can become a little bit easier for us to realize that while we talked about, again, animals do love, they do grieve. What they don't do is they don't ruminate. They don't sit there thinking about, is there a heaven? Am I going to go there? How's my family going to be? That's not what they do.
Yeah. So, well, that's actually pretty comforting, right? That they don't fear death the way humans do.
Yeah.
Right? Because I know a lot, and I think that's the thing, right, around death in general, just with people and dogs, how it's more feared than, and the animals don't seem to. When I've had to let my guys go, they've all been. It's been very smooth transitionally. It's been a very peaceful transition for them. Like it's been calm, no matter whether I did it at the vet or whether I did it at home, right?
Sure. And that's why I'm saying too, it is important to think about these things ahead of time. So if you decide that, I want to have a doctor come to my home when that time comes, you should have those vets lined up. I always say at least have 2 that you've talked to and feel comfortable with, so that if one isn't available, the other one will be. Right? Again, having those markers of knowing when is it time? When do I, have to make that decision to end the suffering? Knowing ahead of time, even, am I going to want to bury them? Am I going to want to cremate them? Who do I trust to do that? Making all those decisions is a lot easier than having to decide when you're in crisis mode.
Oh, makes total sense. Kim, I'm not sure. Kim, what if the vet refuses?
What if the vet refuses to see you? Yeah,
I'm not sure what that means.
I'm kind of betting that might be more along the behavioral lines. So, Kimberly, just let us know if that's what you're saying. Like something behaviorally is happening as opposed to health-wise.
And I'll share with you, I'm a little quiet today because I had a case today that was really bad, kind of timely situation where a lady had contacted me and she has a young dog and he was having issues. I like the dog, but he was not right. And he was lunging and barking, carrying on and stuff like that. Bit her twice. It was I think it was this morning, he cornered her and turned on her. And she was like, I have to make the decision. She ended up leaving her home to her family. And then there was some judgment made on her based upon what her decision was. And she reached out to me and I said, you have to do what you think is safe for you and the dog. And I personally believe that when dogs aggress like that, they're not coming from a good place, like a good feeling place. And he was pretty young. And she was, I think the hardest part about it is that guttural anguish.
Yeah. And I think that is one of the most difficult times, right? Is when it's a behavioral issue, whether even I've had clients whose pets have developed dementia, right? So they're just circling round and round, or and they can be younger when that happens, or when there is a behavioral issue. And kind of what you're saying, I agree with you. I also had clients who came to me whose dog, they had rescued a young dog from a shelter, and at first everything is okay, but she had 2 boys and a husband and herself, and the dog started getting aggressive with the boys to a point where they had to keep the dog in the room whenever they went out and they weren't right there, and she had to keep the dog on a leash whenever anybody would come in, and it got really difficult. And I can't help but think that how hard too, similar to what you're saying, does that have to be for a dog who wants to be able to run, wants to, and I kind of make the similarity between perhaps somebody who has schizophrenia and the drugs aren't working and they don't want to act like that, but they just can't help it. And this vet even said to her, because she said, do you think it's a brain tumor? Like maybe we could do an MRI. And he said to her, okay, so let's say we do an MRI and it is a brain tumor. Then what? We are not going to be able to do anything. And he's like, your dog is unhappy and you're unhappy. Do you want to live that way? Or God forbid the dog gets out and attacks somebody and is taken into custody and then euthanized in a very inhumane way or shot by a cop. Is that what you want to live with? And I really believe that just like there are mentally ill people, there are mentally ill pets, dogs, that can't help themselves. And that is absolutely the time when you have to say it is unique. It is compassionate.
Yeah.
So,
So Carrie, hemangiosarcoma is, that's what I dread.
yeah.
But
Well, and I was gonna say, right, start seeing some of the comments come in. I have a 15-year-old dog, more days behind us than in front of us. Hemangiosarcoma, which is always,
so hard.
Fast. I have Dobermans, so DCM. I mean, they can be playing ball in the yard and they're gone in the next second. So when you're dealing with helping clients and giving advice to people, do you change anything when it's something super traumatic and quick, or preparation, or illness that is coming? I mean, do you change anything that you do?
Yeah, so first of all, I always say that whether we're dealing with an older dog that we know there are more good days behind us than in front, or we're dealing with a diagnosis of hemangiosarcoma that's very quick, or DCM, right? There's always a shock value to it. No matter how ready you think you are, you're not. And so there's that emotional, just wait, what just happened? It's almost like an emotional whiplash. One moment they're there. I know they were sick, right? But how could it be? How could this have happened? He's been my right arm for the past 13 years. Now, there is trauma, too. I have had, unfortunately, clients who have lost 4 or 5 dogs or cats, a mix of cats, in a house fire, right? I have had clients whose pets were run over right in front of them. And for those situations, and every situation is unique, I'll often suggest an individual session first, because it's almost as if in most losses, it's that initial, I can't believe what's just happened. I don't know what to do. We often go into this grief fog where nothing makes sense anymore. Our home doesn't feel like our home anymore. The more you're able to release some of those emotions, talk them out, have somebody validate those losses, that's when at least the intensity of the loss begins to lessen a little bit. So whereas in a group, the good part about the group is that you get to be around people, usually anywhere between 4 to 8 people. and everybody gets to share, but honestly, it's about 10 minutes. There's some cross sharing. In an individual session, you're really working with a specialist who can just let you talk for half an hour and then add in things, or for an hour, and give you specific exercises, coping strategies that are pertinent to your situation. Also, if it's really traumatic, you may not want to talk about it in a group. But the basic grief, the basic emotions are very similar.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit? And this is back to Lisa. When you've had to do an a behavioral euthanasia versus the dog was old and sick, is there a difference in, because I, I, as Lisa kind of alluded to, there's a lot of judgment and a little bit of guilt in that, right?
Yeah.
It's no different when you tell your dog, you tell somebody, "Oh, my dog got sick and passed away," or "I had to euthanize a 2-year-old dog because he was, you know, he had problems," right? There's a different, I don't know.
Yes, and again, for those types of situations, I will often again recommend that a client does start out with um, an individual session, and I think a lot of that is about validating the loss, and trying to help them get to a place, like I said, just because you didn't you didn't see the sickness, it's still a sickness. It's
Yes,
just in their brain. Their brain is sick.
right, absolutely,
Just like the liver is failing, the brain is failing.
right.
Heart is failing, the brain is failing.
Yeah,
There's really no difference, but the big difference can be in the judgment. I will tell you though that in the groups, I mean, I've never really had a time where anyone in the group was judgmental if there was a behavioral euthanasia.
yeah,
Because again, it's grief. Everybody gets that emotion of loving someone so much and having to say so long.
yeah. So Carol was asking about how to prepare, like those of us that have an old dog that, or a dog with an illness that we know um, it's imminent. How to, I mean, I've always found, while even if you know that it's time, it's still, like you said earlier, it's still this, it's still shocking when it happens, even if you know that it's imminent. Yeah, you just don't know when
Yeah.
it is. So how can we prepare for that?
And I part of it is just realizing that there's only so much preparation you can do. Because no matter what, it's gonna hurt like hell when they go. So part of it too is making sure that every day you do get to spend with them is a day filled with love and as many good things as possible. Right. So I think one of the greatest lessons that our dogs teach us is staying in the moment. They don't worry about what's going to happen next week. They don't worry about what's going to happen tomorrow or what happened yesterday. They really stay in the moment with you. So doing the same thing for that. Kind of like we talked about earlier. They do understand a lot more than we give them credit for. Talk to them. Let them know how much you love them and that you're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that their needs come before yours. Again, I do believe that we do have to make those decisions ahead of time. Making sure that you have that vet that you can have an honest conversation with to say, I'm concerned that I'm not going to know when, and I need you to be honest with me, and I need you to help me. Having a friend or a family member go to the vet with you, because sometimes we're so emotional and we don't see things that somebody on the outside might be able to see.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they can ask questions that you might not think of. Maybe they can hear things that you don't hear. Going back to my loss 15 years ago, my guy had lymphoma.
Mm.
And I thought it was an eye infection, and it turned out to be lymphoma. Now, I swear the vet said, well, if we do treatment, he can last between 6 months to a year. Really, what he said is he could last between 3 to 6 months, but I didn't hear that. And in my head, we were going to do the treatment, even though he was 17 years old, and he was going to live another 3 years. Because I was too wrapped up in the grief and the sadness.
Right.
So having somebody to walk alongside you, whether it's somebody like me who's an end-of-life doula, or somebody, a friend, a family member, and actually, again, having those plans, making sure, do I want, maybe I have this amazing vet that I've used for 15 years, and that's where I want the euthanasia to happen. If you really want a natural death, there are animal hospice people. The only way I suggest a natural death is to make sure you have an animal hospice person working with you.
Right. Well, because I find that I'll be honest, I have one of the best gifts we can is give the dogs the ability to not suffer. I have
Right.
I have had I have seen firsthand a dog that suffered such a long illness, so long, and it was just difficult. And it wasn't my dog; it was somebody else's dog that I had to. And they didn't believe in euthanizing him, and they didn't. And the dog suffered a very, very, very long time. And it was actually it was a very difficult thing for me to witness. And in that case, I wish I would have had a way to help that person understand that this is not something, this was not okay to allow this animal to suffer this long. And it was months and months and months. It was really bad. And the dog did finally die on its own, but it was a lot of suffering happened there. A lot.
Yeah.
Well, I know from my own perspective, I mean, you guys know, and I know we all have, our own stuff that's happened with passing of dogs. I think the hardest, it was a 2-year period where I lost 6 dogs.
Oof.
And I remember my husband, we would, I would say, time's coming, we get prepared for it. And then I'm a rip the Band-Aid off kind of person. So like I was like, okay, we're done. Like my last dog, Lucas, he was on the bed with me. And then all of a sudden in the middle of the night, he fell off the bed, stumbled into the closet, vomited. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm just done. It's not fair. I'm done.
Yeah.
And the next day I took him in and said goodbye. And it was hard. I mean, of course, it's always going to be hard no matter what you do. My husband drove me, but he will not go in ever. So I always do it by myself, which I mean, I'm okay with because I'm not that's me. That's how I deal with things where I'm like, okay. And then I got to go. And my vets are like, okay, you got to go, because it's kind of like that. Like, I don't want to see them in that state for very long because I want to remember how they were. But yeah, I think it's a very personal thing for everybody. Right. But I do agree that it is one of the most gracious gifts that we can give them.
Yeah, we can't do it for people.
No.
You can. You live in New Mexico.
Yeah.
It's true, right?
Yes.
And like I have somebody I work with who has in her family quite a lot of Alzheimer's, right? And so she said, I know my children probably won't want to do this for me, but these are my wishes. When I get to this point, I 100% want you to take me to New Mexico, and I don't want to live anymore. I mean, and that's truly, you can see sometimes with pets, right? Same thing. Like that doesn't happen very often with people, but she has a voice, and she goes, and I still don't think my family will do it for me. She goes, that's what's the scariest part.
Yeah, and I will tell you, my parents were young when they passed. They passed individually, but both of them were young. And by the time I was 40 years old, I had lost both parents, 41 actually. But my mom was in a decline, and she actually had a DNR. Unfortunately, at the hospital, when she coded, they didn't see the DNR, so they revived her. And so I flew in. I was living in California. I flew to New Jersey to be with her. And we had to say to the doctor, take the respirator. And again, because she had the DNR, take off the respirator. Even knowing, because I was one of the lucky ones. My mom was my best friend. Even knowing that's what she wanted, to have to say those words. And I went through, well, did I kill her? What, did I really do it? Well,
Yeah.
she had it written down. They shouldn't have revived her anyway. But even still, it's difficult.
Yeah.
You know, and I think euthanasia really, I mean, I think we have this great gift of them giving us this unconditional love for all these years. And then at the end, euthanasia is our way of giving them unconditional love back. Because as my client said best one time, and I was working with her, she had a Sheltie that was done, you know, in the end stage. And she called me up one day and she said, Sandy, I'm going to take him in today. Can you come with me? And I said, sure. And, you know, I got there and I gave her a hug and she said, you know, this is torture, right? But she said, I know, even though I'm ending his suffering, today is the day mine begins. And for a lot of us, that is true. Now, the good part of that is that it is possible to begin to heal. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey of 1,000 little steps, and sometimes it's more steps backward than forward, but it can begin to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, because that's you know that's the so for people who are really struggling, like I I don't know if this is even a good statement to say. Between Lisa, Joanne, and I, we've let go. We've said goodbye to lots and lots of dogs over the years. And all of us deal with it differently. Like Lisa was saying, she's gone in alone. My husband's always been with me when we let the dogs go, but he handles it in a much more different way, obviously, than I do. Um, and you're right, everybody's a little different. So I've had clients that have lost their dogs and they don't want to get another one because the pain was so bad they couldn't bear the thought of doing that again, which is
Yeah.
I always say it's like, while it's very painful to go through that, and I've been through it quite a few times, what they add to your life is so much more than you know the suffering at the end. They do add so much to your life. So, but some people have a difficult time. Have you had that experience where people just don't want to, they can't deal with this part of it? And
Well, you know, and here's the thing to know, and I mean, you all kind of alluded to it, right? Is that everyone goes through grief differently. It's never going to be the same for any two people, like you were saying, who are married. Your husband may go through it one way, you may go through it another. Why? Number one, you're different people. You have different grief histories. You have different relationships with the past. Also, every loss you go through is going to be different because, again, a different relationship with the pet and different circumstances. We just came out of a pandemic where losses were so much harder too, right? But I do personally believe, from my experience in helping people, that you shouldn't go out the next day, the next week, and get another dog. And there's a few reasons why. Not that you don't ever get another dog, but I believe you have to work through the grief, right? So many times I see people we call it a grief fog, where they're not able to go to work, they're not able to focus, they have different difficulties in relationships because they haven't taken the time to work through that grief. That being said, a lot of times too, people will say, I can't handle being alone, and they'll rush out and get another pet. The problem with that is if you don't take the time to work through those emotions, people think, oh, I'm going to bring another dog in and he's going to make me smile and he's going to make me laugh and keep me occupied. Absolutely, all three things are true. The thing that is not true is he's not going to take away your grief, and he's not going to be the pet that you lost.
Correct.
And a lot of times people have a hard time with that because they expect that new pet to take away the grief, to take away the loss, to take away the feelings of sadness. And so when they don't, I've seen many times they'll bring the pet back because it didn't work. I had clients, young couple, that had a young dog, like 3 or 4, was run over in front of them. And this woman was determined, the husband not so much, but she was ready to get another dog after a couple weeks. And sure enough, she did. And I knew, she kept asking me when was the right time. She was coming to the group, and I told her, I recommend that you take the time to work through the loss. It's been a traumatic loss. When it came to a couple of groups, I never saw her. About 3 months later, I got a call from so hard. I couldn't even understand who it was. And sure enough, it was this woman. She had talked her husband into getting 2 Maltese puppies. Their dog was a Maltese that they lost. She was unable to even be 3 months later in the same room with the dogs.
Oh, wow.
She couldn't handle. They were too much for her, too much energy. They reminded her too much. I wound up working with her, going to her house and with her. And it was a month or 2 before she was even able to let the dog sit on the couch with her. Now, that's not everybody. But the most important thing to remember is that you can't, even though you may have gone through 12 different losses, you can't tell somebody else when is the right time.
Right.
The greatest thing you can do is you can listen and you can validate their loss. You never, ever want to say to somebody, I know how you feel. How can you know how they feel? Are you in their body? Have you lived their life that they have? Have you walked in their shoes? You can definitely relate to somebody and say, I've gone through a similar loss, and share that story. But you never want to say to someone, I know how you feel, because you don't.
Right. So Terry put something, and this is kind of for me and for I think most of us. I think Joanne and Lisa, we have a multi-dog home all the time. And I'll be honest, one of my first losses that was difficult. If I wouldn't have had the other dogs in my life at that time, I think it would have been much more challenging for me to get past it. But I had while I was missing the other dog and I was very sad about it, and I, cry and all that, I did have the other dogs that needed my attention and focus and had to help. So that really helped me through that process, and continues to. We usually stagger them. So there's older and younger. And so there's always going to be a dog there. However, now with multiple dogs, you have to deal with their grief as well. So it's another, and it's an added element that we have, but it does help kind of get through some of that, because when Bandit died, I didn't get off the couch for a couple of days, and finally, my other dogs were like, okay,
Yeah.
I need your attention. My husband actually handled the dogs for that time. It was that challenging. So, Yeah, but they having the other dogs was helpful in trying to help get, they need you, they still have to get, and I know that doesn't work the same for all, but but for
No,
me, it gives me that help, right?
right. And it is a distraction. Absolutely. And it doesn't mean you can't love on another dog or take care of another dog, but it's just not going to take away the grief.
No, no, not at all.
That's the only difference. And I have had cases where the dogs or the pets in the home really, if there was a strong bond, really grieve as
Mm-hmm.
well for the loss of the one who passed, to a point where they had to take them to the vet, and they even gave them something to help with their grief too, because they weren't eating okay, their behaviors had changed, you know.
Yeah.
They weren't
So,
sleeping right.
right. No, it's interesting. And Aaron just posted something. I had a question about that. We've all had dogs that have passed that are not our dogs, they're student dogs. Um, and what Tom and Aaron do is they actually have, they do something during class so everyone can acknowledge the loss as well, which for
Yeah.
some people is very, very helpful. It helps, but some people, it's very it depends. um and I know before we end tonight, I wanted to talk about a little bit about that, compassionate care for those of us
Compassion fatigue, sure.
that's it, because I've had stints, where we've had dogs, we lose one dog after another in classes, because especially if we have a lot of students, a lot of classes, a lot, and they just, sometimes it all, I recall a weekend we had three dogs, we lost three dogs in 2 days. And so I have the clients calling me that their dog, it was just really, for me, it was awful, because they're all dogs. You guys, stop it. They're running and playing.
Uh,
They find the top anyway, but it was very hard for me, because it's like I had to try to be there for them, but doing it three times in a short succession was really, really hard. And all the dogs were I was very close to, I mean, they had been with me for a lot of them since they were babies, so it was really very,
yeah.
it was you try to deal with it the best you can, but sometimes it's tough.
Yeah, and I think for those of us, again, like I said, in the class I do, the online pet loss specialist class, again, we have had quite a good number of those of people who are dog trainers, again, pet sitters, veterinary people. So anyone who's an animal caregiver, right? Why do we go into these fields? Most times it's because we do have that empathy, that compassion. We love animals. That's what we want to do, is be around people who love them too, like we do. And then we want to help them. We want to help people be able to, for instance, with dog trainers, right, be able to have the best life with their dogs by helping in training, or if there's a problem. And so we're caregivers with a large degree of empathy. And so the greatest thing that we can do is, number one, take care of ourselves. So I would ask you, like, how many of you have a self-care plan where you find time, maybe at least once a week, to do something nice for yourself? How many of you have good, strong boundaries where your hours are from 9 to 7, Monday through Friday, and 10 to 4 on Saturday, and Sunday it's family day, and you stick to that? Those are really important parts of it.
Yeah. I would say of the three of us, the one that's best at that is Joanne.
Okay.
She's the best at it. She really is. I'm the
And it's
worst. And I could say I'm pretty much the worst at it. So
but because we can easily, I always say you can't pour from an empty kettle.
Mhm.
If we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to take care of or help other people or other pets. So we have to do that. The second thing too is I really believe to understand about grief and loss, to always have resources, have the name of a pet loss specialist, have a pet loss book that you could refer somebody to, have coping strategies. And for anyone on the call, again, I put the information for the groups and chat room in there. If you want more information, please feel free to email me at sandy@petlosspartners.org, and I'd be glad to have a conversation with you or answer any questions you have. But to have resources for your clients, but also for yourself. I always tell my veterinary clients who work at veterinary practices, I recommend in their break room, they have a wall where they light a virtual, like a fake candle, and put pictures of the pets that they've lost. And really allow yourself to feel that grief, knowing that it's completely normal, and to work through that loss, to take the time to have somebody. Another thing is have a self-care buddy. So if you're a dog trainer, is there somebody that you work closely with, that you really align with, that if you have a difficult situation, a loss or impending loss, you can call somebody and talk to them? I mean, for those of us in the mental health care field, they always say we should have somebody who we can talk to. I have somebody I can talk to. I deal with grief pretty much, 7 days a week. I do take, and I didn't do this for the first 5 years that I was working in the field. I do take a day and I'll go to a concert or I'll hang out with a friend. I never used to do that. And take that time for myself. There are losses that affect me too.
I know for me, I had one of those big giant tragedies where you lost everything. And so I think one of the biggest things for humans anyway is we're taught from a very young age. It's getting better now with new generations, but we're taught even as women, right? Like, don't show your emotions and pull it together when you're in public and all those things. And I've had many, many moments where it's like, okay, this has to come out, right? I always say, like, keeping that stuff in is how tumors grow. So
you're absolutely right. There is evidence that shows that grief suppresses our immune system. You've heard of the broken heart syndrome. It can affect our health. We do need, I always talk about, right, that if you think about a loss, it almost feels like, I don't know about for you, but for me, it feels like when I have a big loss, like I can't breathe. It's almost like there's a boulder laying on top of me. Yep. Right. Now, I can eat now, and I hate this saying, oh, time heals. No, it doesn't. Time is just another day. It's what you do with that time. But if you take the time and you start chipping away at that boulder by having that self-care buddy, going to a support group, having an individual session, all of a sudden that boulder becomes more like a rock. And you keep chipping away at it. You keep writing a letter, reading a book, and all of a sudden it becomes like a stone. And you keep chipping away at it. And then eventually it becomes pebbles. Now, those pebbles are always going to be there. Mm-hmm. Grief doesn't just magically disappear. I mourn for my mom and my dad who have been gone 20 years now, right? And my boy has been gone 15 years now, and the other pets that I've had, I will always mourn for them. But I took the time to work through it. So now I remember more of the happy times and the love that we shared. So
So Tiffany just put that she just lost your dog. Yeah. So Tiffany, don't be surprised. Like even after I lost Cha-Cha, I'm walking through my business, walk into a room, and I just start to cry because I think about her,
yeah,
and it's gonna happen for a little while. Eventually, it doesn't happen as often, right? But early
yeah,
on,
and
it's
again, I mean, if you feel like you want to join us for a group, or if you feel, please don't hesitate to reach out, and don't realize that just because we're in this field, we have to go through it alone. It's the same thing you don't. I do support groups just for those in the veterinary field because sometimes they're not comfortable talking around with people who are not in their field. So
right.
I'll do a support group just for them.
So I put your support groups out there too, to go in there. Yeah, because it is challenging. Like dog trainers, um, I mean, I'm lucky. I get Joanne and Lisa and other trainers that work with me at my in my business. We're able to chat about it and you know um, be there for each other when we have those losses. And also with client dogs, it becomes pretty it's hard with the client. It's with certain client dogs. Um, so we have to try to be supportive, but we're also missing that dog or hurting that dog.
Absolutely. And doesn't it make sense again, right? We have this affinity for dogs. We love dogs. So why would we think that just because they don't live with us 24/7, it's not going to hurt? Sometimes it may hurt more because we've seen that progress that we've got to work with them or we've had them for years. So our loss is just as valid as their family's loss.
Yeah, yeah, because that's been with some of the you want to be strong and supportive for them, but you're also like, oh my god, because yeah, all of a sudden the dog's not there anymore. They're not, you know, they're not in your, you notice that as the days go on, you notice the change, right? The dog's not there anymore. The person may be also not there anymore either. So that's just for us, it's a double whammy because the person
Yeah.
and the dog are not there.
And there's nothing wrong, I will tell you, right? Because of the society that we live in, that everybody's around us for the first few days after a loss. And then after a week, after 2 weeks, everybody's gone. And everybody starts feeling, if a month later you're still bringing up your dog, makes people very uncomfortable. So I always recommend to pet sitters, to dog trainers, if you're thinking about Fluffy that you've had as a client for 4 years, 3 weeks later, and you're thinking about the dog and their family, give them a call or send them an email or a text saying, I was thinking about you today. I loved working with Fluffy, and my heart goes out for you. And I just want to let you know I'm here.
That's yeah. We one specific one. Luckily, it's a long time client, almost 18 years. Um, her first dog. She's been with me through 3 dogs. She's on her third dog now. But the loss of her first dog was pretty hard for me. Okay,
Yeah.
it's hard for me when they waited to tell me when I came back from a trip, and it was her dog. But I was very connected to this particular dog.
Sure.
So it was, and we still luckily talk about Nipper all the time. She was a pretty funny dog. She was
Yeah.
awesome. But
Yeah.
that
And that
particular,
helps everybody.
yeah, and she's lost Penny recently, and we're able to talk about her as well. So it's nice to be able to. They're still there all the time, just you know, in a different way. But yes, and some people do get uncomfortable. I mean, this client, and she's a friend, really, and she's okay to talk. We talk about it all the time, so it's a nice. It's
Yeah.
Fido. You're such a bad dog. Cat. Anyway, so yeah, all the Facebook memories.
Mhm.
Yeah, those are tough. I get it. My cat has them always make a cameo every
I
night.
know. Right?
So you know that's really good advice. I'll be honest, I am terrible at self-care. I'm getting better, but it's very hard for me. It's not something that's natural and easy for me. So I definitely need to uh, get better at that. So um
And
yeah.
you know what? It starts again with baby steps, right? What one thing, like I'll share with you, I am a coffee nut. And here I am, and it's 9 o'clock on the East Coast, right? And I'm sitting here with my coffee. Why? Because coffee is a soother for me. I will tell you that when I was doing groups on the West Coast in person, um, I always made sure to stop at a Starbucks before I started the group, to a point where if I didn't come in with a Starbucks, people in the group would say, "Where's your Starbucks? You want me to go get one for you?" And you know, so I mean, something little like that. Do you enjoy going for a hike just once a week? Take an hour and go for a hike. That's it. Starts with baby steps. It doesn't have to be something elaborate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely because I am I've gotten better. I have gotten every once in a while. It's just for me it's being more consistent with it. So but yeah, it'll get there. So any other things that you would like to leave us with as far as we put all the stuff is the support group information. Sandy's email is there, and the quality of life
Scale.
scale is there.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I will send you the pledge from the heart if you want to share that with people too. You can email that out. That's something we use. But yeah, here's what I want to say. I mean, I think it's really important to not judge your feelings, whatever they are around grief, whether it's sadness or anger or guilt. Guilt is the most common emotion. I will tell you 98%, and I'm not exaggerating, no matter what the circumstances, we feel guilty. We waited too long. We didn't wait long enough. We did this treatment. We shouldn't have done that treatment. We said this. We didn't say that. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Whatever the emotions, just realize that it's part of this grief and allow yourself that time to grieve. I'm not saying, again, I know we're talking about getting another dog. I'm not saying don't get another dog. I'm saying allow yourself the time you need to grieve. Those dogs will always be out there looking for homes, right?
yes,
And the more you, again, it goes back to self-care. The more you take care of yourself, the more you can open up your heart to another one. But allow yourself to feel your own grief. Realize too, and I always say this, that do no harm, right? If you're concerned about a client, refer them to somebody. Have those resources. Again, if you want to reach out to me, I'll give you a list of resources that you can offer your clients. But have those resources. You're not, unless you want to take the course, and you're more than welcome. You're not a pet loss specialist.
mhm,
You can tell somebody something that you went through. Remember, don't say, "I know how you feel," because you don't. But you're not trained in pet loss. The best you can do is listen, is validate their loss, have the resources to support them. And that's the greatest way you can help yourself and your clients.
mm. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope this is helpful to kind of prepare us, all of us that love dogs or are in this business or share our lives with dogs. We're all going to go through it at some point or another. And it's also good to just remind to be there for each other too. That's one thing with the dog sport community. That people in classes become a pretty tight family unit, and so the supports. It's nice sometimes to have that support there. So anyway, thank you, Sandy. I appreciate it. I will reach out to you about getting the resources and all that, so we can have it for our clients, because that does help being able to, especially for those that are struggling a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Sandy,
all.
for coming.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Good night.
Bye.